A barefoot boy stepped into the road holding a cardboard sign, stopping a convoy of black luxury cars from moving forward. He didn't know he'd just flagged down Alfredo Lorenzo, one of the most feared mafia bosses on the eastern seaboard. But instead of ordering his men to remove the obstacle, Alfredo read the trembling words on that sign: "Please don't let them take our house." Now the predators circling this family are about to discover that the forest already has an apex predator. The mist came heavy that morning, rolling off the coast and settling over the narrow road like a living thing. It swallowed the asphalt in thick gray curtains, turning the skeletal trees into shadows that might have been watching or sleeping. The air tasted of salt and rain, cold enough to burn the throat. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound until he appeared. The boy materialized from the fog like something conjured from desperation itself. His tattered olive hoodie hung loose over mud-streaked cargo pants. He stood barefoot in the center of the road, small hands gripping a piece of cardboard torn from a shipping box. The words were written in black marker, uneven and urgent. He wasn't begging. He wasn't crying. He was taking a stand. His bare feet pressed against the wet pavement, toes curled against the cold. His dark hair hung in his eyes, and when the wind caught his hood, pulling it back, the bruise along his jawline became visible. Fresh. Maybe a day old. A parting gift from Polly when he'd tried to block the vulture crew from entering his house yesterday. He stood there trembling, not from fear of the vehicles approaching through the mist, but from the sheer weight of everything riding on this moment. Then he saw them. If this story got you hooked, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. And while you're here, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Alright, let's dive in. 3 black Mercedes S-Class sedans emerged from the fog like sharks breaking through deep water. Chrome grills caught what little light penetrated the mist, and their engines purred with the kind of money that never had to announce itself. They moved in formation, predatory and precise, the lead vehicle's headlights cutting twin beams through the gray. The convoy slowed. Christopher didn't move. His arms ached from holding the sign, but he kept it high, the cardboard already going soft from moisture. His heart hammered against his ribs so hard he thought it might crack through bone. But his feet stayed planted. His jaw stayed set, even though it throbbed where Polly's backhand had connected yesterday. The lead Mercedes stopped 15 feet away. Its engine idled, a low rumble that Christopher felt in his chest. He could see shapes behind the tinted windows, shadows consulting with other shadows. Any second now, they'd roll forward. Any second now, they'd push him aside like the obstacle he was. Any second now. The driver's door opened. A man emerged in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Christopher's entire house. He was built like a wall, shoulders that could have held up buildings, hands that looked capable of breaking necks without breaking a sweat. He wore sunglasses despite the fog, and when he moved toward Christopher, his hand drifted toward his jacket in a gesture that made Christopher's bladder clench. "Kid." The man's voice was gravel and warning. "You picked the wrong road to play on." Christopher's mouth went dry, but he didn't lower the sign. Couldn't. If he lowered it now, if he ran now, there'd be nothing left to fight for. His mother's face flashed through his mind, the way she'd looked last night, sitting at their kitchen table with papers spread before her like a death sentence, tears she'd tried to hide rolling down her cheeks. "I'm not playing." Christopher's voice cracked, but he forced the words out anyway. "Please. Just read it." The suited man took another step forward, and Christopher braced himself for hands that would lift him off the road like he weighed nothing. But then the rear door of the Mercedes opened, and everything changed. The air itself seemed to shift. A different kind of presence stepped into the mist, and Christopher knew immediately this was someone who made the wall-shouldered man look like hired muscle, because that's exactly what he was. Alfredo Lorenzo didn't announce himself. He didn't need to. He moved like violence wrapped in silk, every step deliberate, every gesture economical. He wore a midnight blue suit with a crisp white shirt open at the collar, no tie, and when he removed his sunglasses, his eyes were the color of gunmetal in winter. Cold. Assessing. Absolutely terrifying. He was maybe 40, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from Sicilian marble. A scar interrupted his left eyebrow, thin and precise, the kind that came from a blade held by someone who knew what they were doing. His presence filled the road the way the fog had, impossible to ignore, impossible to escape. Alfredo studied Christopher for a long moment, those winter eyes taking in every detail, the bare feet, the bruise, the trembling hands that refused to lower the sign. Then his gaze shifted to the cardboard itself. Christopher watched him read, watched his expression remain absolutely neutral, watched and waited while his entire world balanced on whatever this man would do next. Alfredo's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then he spoke, and his voice was smoke over broken glass. "Tell me about your house, kid." Christopher's throat worked, but no sound came out. Up close, Alfredo Lorenzo was even more terrifying than from a distance. He smelled like expensive cologne and something darker underneath. Gunpowder, maybe, or the kind of authority that didn't need to raise its voice to make grown men weep. Christopher started, then stopped. His hands shook harder, making the cardboard rattle. "My mom. They're trying to take our house." Alfredo's expression didn't change. "Who's they?" "The bank. But also," Christopher's voice dropped to barely a whisper, "other people. Men who came yesterday. They said if Mom doesn't pay by Friday, they'll help themselves to other forms of payment." Something flickered behind Alfredo's eyes. Brief. Deadly. Gone before Christopher could identify it. "Your mother got a name?" "Kathleen. Kathleen Reeves." The words tumbled out faster now. Desperation, overriding fear. "She's a nurse. Works doubles at County General, sometimes triples. But my dad, he died 18 months ago. Lung cancer. The bills, they just kept coming. And the insurance didn't cover everything. And now the mortgage is 3 months behind. And Mom sold everything we had left except..." "Slow down." Alfredo's voice cut through Christopher's panic like a scalpel. Not cruel, but absolute. "How old are you?" 12. Almost 13. "And you thought standing in the middle of a foggy road would solve your problems?" Christopher's chin lifted, despite the tears burning his eyes. "I thought maybe someone would stop. Someone who could help. Someone who..." He faltered, looking at the convoy, the suited men now standing outside their vehicles, watching this interaction. "Someone who matters." Alfredo's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Something colder. "You know who I am, kid." "No, sir. But you know what these cars mean. What men in suits driving through back roads at dawn usually means." Christopher nodded slowly. He'd lived in this neighborhood long enough. He'd heard the stories. The whispers about shipments that came through the docks at night. About money that flowed through legitimate businesses like water through cupped hands. Never quite visible, but always present. "And you flagged us down anyway." "I didn't know what else to do." Christopher's voice cracked completely now. "The men who came yesterday, they weren't from the bank. They said the bank sold our debt. Said Mom was pretty enough to work off what we owe. They laughed when they said it. They laughed. And Mom she just stood there trying to smile like everything was fine, like she wasn't terrified. But I saw her hands shaking and I heard her crying in the bathroom after they left and..." "What men?" Alfredo's voice had gone very quiet, dangerously quiet. "Names?" "I don't know. One of them had a tattoo on his neck, some kind of bird. The other one called him Polly." Christopher touched his bruised jaw unconsciously. "Polly hit me when I tried to stop them from going inside. Told me to stay out of grown folks' business." Alfredo exchanged a glance with the wall-shouldered man, who'd moved closer during Christopher's confession. Something passed between them, wordless and weighted with the promise of violence. "This debt," Alfredo said, turning back to Christopher. "How much?" $83,000. Christopher's shoulders sagged. "Mom says we'd need a miracle." Alfredo was silent for a long moment, studying the boy with those winter eyes. Then he reached into his jacket. Christopher flinched and pulled out a phone. He made a call, turning slightly away, speaking in rapid Italian too quiet for Christopher to hear. When he finished, he looked at Christopher again. "Get in the car, kid. You're taking me to your mother." The Reeves house sat at the end of Carpenter Street like an apology. Once, it had been yellow. Christopher could still see traces of paint clinging to the weathered clapboard siding. Now it was mostly gray, the color of surrender. The porch sagged on one side, held up by concrete blocks someone had painted to look like bricks. The effort of that detail, the stubborn dignity of it, made something tighten in Alfredo's chest. He'd sent Christopher home in the second vehicle with Marco, one of his men, who looked slightly less terrifying than the others. Christopher had protested at first, clutching his soggy cardboard sign like a talisman, but Alfredo had given him a look that ended the argument. Now Alfredo stood in the tree line across the street, invisible in the lingering fog, watching. Waiting. He hadn't survived 20 years in this business by rushing into situations blind. "Boss." Dante materialized beside him, moving silent as smoke despite his size. 3 men inside. Black Escalade parked in the driveway, registered to a shell company out of Newark. Vulture crew. Alfredo's jaw tightened. The Vulture crew. Bottom feeders who bought distressed debt for pennies on the dollar, then squeezed their victims until blood came out. They operated in the gray spaces between legal and criminal, protected by lawyers and the kind of bureaucratic labyrinth that made them hard to touch. Hard, not impossible. "The woman?" Alfredo asked. "Inside. Alone with them." Dante's voice went flat. Been in there 20 minutes. 20 minutes too long. Through the front window, curtains hadn't been drawn, either because Kathleen Reeves was too proud or too scared to look like she had something to hide. Alfredo could see movement. A woman stood with her back to the wall, arms crossed over her scrubs. Even from this distance, even through dirty glass, he could see the tension in her shoulders. 3 men circled her like sharks, scenting blood. The one with the neck tattoo, Polly, Christopher had called him, stood closest, invading her space in a way that made Alfredo's hands curl into fists. Another man, lean and ferrety with slicked-back hair, rifled through kitchen drawers with the casual entitlement of someone who believed he owned everything he touched. But it was the third man who made Alfredo's blood run cold. Basilio Thorne, local muscle with delusions of empire, a man who'd been climbing the criminal ladder by stepping on throats. He wore a leather jacket over a designer t-shirt, gold chains catching the light, and when he smiled at Kathleen, it was the smile of something that enjoyed suffering. "Audio?" Alfredo asked. Dante tapped his phone. A moment later, voices crackled through the small speaker, tinny but clear enough. "Just being friendly, Ms. Reeves." Thorne's voice was oil and razors. "We're offering you options. The bank, they're heartless, you know? They just want their money. We're more flexible." "I told you yesterday." Kathleen's voice shook, but held. "I need more time. I'm working extra shifts. I've applied for." "Time's a luxury, sweetheart." Polly cut her off, stepping closer. "And luxuries cost extra. Your boy learned that yesterday when he got mouthy." The ferrety man laughed, ugly and knowing. "What my associate means," Thorne said smoothly, "is that we've already been generous. Extended the deadline once. But generosity has limits." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice dropped to something obscene. "Although, like I said, we can be creative about payment plans." Kathleen's face went white. Alfredo had heard enough. He stepped from the trees, adjusting his cuffs with deliberate precision. Dante fell into step beside him, and 2 more men emerged from the fog like wraiths. They crossed the street in silence. Time to teach the vulture crew about actual predators. The door didn't break when Alfredo opened it. He didn't need theatrics. The simple act of his presence filling the doorway was enough to freeze every person in the room mid-breath. Thorne turned first, his smile dying like a candle in a hurricane. Polly's hand twitched toward his waistband before common sense overrode instinct. The ferrety man dropped the drawer he'd been emptying, mail scattering across the linoleum floor like leaves. Kathleen Reeves pressed harder against the wall, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from a double shift, dark circles under eyes that had seen too much and slept too little. She was younger than Alfredo expected, mid-30s maybe, with auburn hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and the kind of exhausted beauty that came from fighting battles no one should have to fight alone. "Gentlemen," Alfredo's voice was cordial, almost pleasant, which made it infinitely more dangerous. "I believe the lady asked you to leave." Thorne recovered first, his street-learned bravado reasserting itself. "This is private business, friend. You got the wrong house." Alfredo Lorenzo doesn't get wrong houses. Dante spoke from behind his boss, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Recognition hit Thorne like a fist. The color drained from his face, then flooded back in a crimson wave of panic and desperate calculation. Beside him, Polly had gone very still, the kind of stillness prey animals achieve when a predator's eyes lock on. "Mr. Lorenzo," Thorne's voice climbed an octave. "Sir, we had no idea this was one of your." "It wasn't." Alfredo stepped fully into the house, and his men fanned out behind him like shadows. "Until about an hour ago." He let that sit in the air while he turned his attention to Kathleen. Up close, he could see the tremor in her hands, the way she was trying to decide if his arrival made things better or catastrophically worse. "Ms. Reeves, I met your son this morning. Brave kid. Stupid, but brave." Her eyes widened. "Christopher? Is he?" "He's fine. In my car outside, with one of my men, probably eating candy Marco keeps for his own kids." Alfredo turned back to Thorne. "The debt she owes. Who holds it?" "Sir, that's who holds it." Thorne swallowed hard. "We bought it from Liberty First Credit Union. Standard acquisition. Everything's legal, we got papers." "How much did you pay for it?" Silence. "How much?" "7,000, the ferrety man spoke up, his voice barely a whisper. 7,000 for 83,000 in debt. Alfredo smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Quite the investment. I'm gonna make you a better offer. You're gonna give me those papers. All of them. And you're gonna walk away from this house, this street, and Ms. Reeves like she never existed." "But sir," Thorne started. "I'm gonna give you $8,000. $1,000 profit for 10 minutes of work. That's a good deal. Alfredo's smile vanished. The alternative is, I take the papers anyway, and you leave here in pieces. Marco sweeps into trash bags. Behind Alfredo, his phone buzzed. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his expression went from cold to glacial. Boss, Dante said quietly. That's Carmine. Alfredo answered. Not now. But Carmine's voice came through anyway, tight with disapproval that transcended the phone's small speaker. You stopped a convoy for a kid with a sign? You're involving yourself in civilian debt collection? Alfredo, what the hell are you thinking? Every person in the room heard it. Thorne's eyes flickered with renewed calculation. Alfredo ended the call without responding to Carmine. He'd deal with internal politics later. Right now, he had vultures to educate. Ms. Reeves. He kept his eyes on Thorne. Take your son upstairs. Stay there until I tell you otherwise. Kathleen hesitated, caught between instincts pulling in opposite directions. Trust the devil you know, or the one who just walked through your door. Now, please. Something in his tone, not the coldness, but the certainty underneath it, made the decision for her. She moved toward the door where Marco stood with Christopher, who looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past hour. Mom! Upstairs, baby. It's okay. They disappeared, and Alfredo waited until he heard a door close overhead before turning his full attention back to the vulture crew. Here's what's going to happen, he said. You're going to meet me. Neutral ground. 1 hour. McGinty's warehouse on Pier 9. Thorne's jaw worked. Sir, with respect, we can settle this right here. McGinty's. 1 hour. Just you and me. Alfredo's smile returned, sharp as a blade. We're going to have a conversation about territory, respect, and what happens when small fish forget which pond they're swimming in. And if I don't come, then I come find you. And I won't be in a conversational mood. Dante stepped forward, holding out a burner phone. You'll get a call 30 minutes before. Come alone. Try anything cute, and your mother in Hoboken starts getting pieces of you in the mail. Thorne took the phone with shaking hands. Now get out of her house, Alfredo said quietly. They left like smoke and wind. McGinty's warehouse had been abandoned for 3 years, ever since the owner decided testifying against the Genovese family was bad for his health and disappeared into witness protection. Now it was just rust and shadows, and the smell of salt rot from the pier. Alfredo arrived early. Always arrive early. Dante and 2 others swept the perimeter, checking for surprises, while Alfredo stood in the center of the empty space and waited. Thorne arrived alone, as instructed, but the bravado from the house had returned. Not fully. He wasn't stupid, but enough to be dangerous. He walked in with his leather jacket open, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. Mr. Lorenzo. He stopped 10 feet away. I appreciate you giving me a chance to explain. You're still operating in my territory. Sir, the vulture crew, we're not mobbed up. We're independent contractors. Gray market stuff. We stay out of family business. We pay our respect taxes. Did you pay respect taxes on the Reeves debt? Silence. I thought not. Alfredo circled slowly, and Thorne turned to keep him in sight. Here's the thing about gray markets, Basilio. They only exist because we allow them to exist. You operate in the shadows we cast. You forget that, you stop being useful. I understand, and I'm willing to walk away from the Reeves situation. Like you said, clean break, everyone's happy. You're still talking like you have a choice. Thorne's expression flickered. Sir? The debt is mine now. The house is under my protection. Ms. Reeves is under my protection. But more importantly, Alfredo stopped circling, facing Thorne directly. You threatened a nurse. A widow. A woman whose only crime was trying to save her dying husband. And you had one of your animals put hands on her 12-year-old son. Business is business. No. Alfredo's voice dropped to something sub-zero. Predators like you. You're a cancer. You give men like me a bad name. Thorne's jaw set. And there it was. The flash of defiance, of greed that couldn't quite let go. With respect, Mr. Lorenzo, you're asking me to walk away from a significant revenue stream. The Reeves situation, sure, but you're also saying I need to change my entire business model. That's a big ask. Alfredo saw it then. The calculation, the weighing of risks. Thorne was already thinking about workarounds, about waiting until Alfredo's attention moved elsewhere, about how to salvage this. Too greedy to listen, too stupid to live. This meeting is over, Alfredo said. You have 48 hours to liquidate your debt portfolio and leave the state, or I'll do it for you. Thorne nodded, but Alfredo saw the lie in his eyes, saw the plan already forming. This man wouldn't leave. He'd regroup, recalculate, and strike back the only way cornered rats knew how. By burning everything down. The Lorenzo estate sat behind wrought iron gates like something conjured from old money and older violence. It sprawled across 12 acres of manicured lawn, the main house, a testament to what happened when Italian Renaissance architecture collided with American excess. Christopher pressed his face against the Mercedes window, now wearing shoes that Marco had somehow procured during the drive. Simple sneakers that were half a size too big, but infinitely better than bare feet. "Mom should be here," he said for the third time since they'd left Carpenter Street. "You said she'd be here. She will be." Marco's voice was surprisingly gentle for a man who looked like he bench-pressed refrigerators. "Boss is handling some business first. Your mom's at the hospital finishing her shift. We got people watching her. She's safe." Christopher wasn't sure he believed in safety anymore. Not after yesterday. Not after this morning. Not after watching Alfredo Lorenzo transform his kitchen into something from a movie he was too young to watch. The car stopped at the front entrance, where marble steps led to doors that probably cost more than his entire neighborhood. A woman emerged, Mediterranean, elegant, wearing an expression that suggested she'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by most of it. "This is the boy?" she asked Marco in accented English. "Christopher Reeves. Boss wants him kept comfortable. Fed, safe. Already got him shoes, but he needs everything else." Her expression softened marginally. "Come, child. You look half-starved." Christopher followed her inside and immediately forgot how to breathe. The foyer alone was bigger than his house. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings painted with scenes he didn't recognize. Angels and demons, maybe. Or gods doing godly things. The floor was marble shot through with gold veins, and his borrowed sneakers squeaked against it. "I should." He looked down at his shoes, his mud-streaked pants. "I shouldn't be here. I'm getting everything dirty." The woman, she'd introduced herself as Sophia, the housekeeper, waved dismissively. "Floor's clean. Boys don't. Come." She led him through hallways that seemed to stretch forever, past rooms filled with furniture that belonged in museums, until they reached a kitchen that looked like it could feed an army. She pointed to a stool at the marble island. "Sit. Eat." Christopher sat. Within minutes, food appeared. Real food. Not the canned soup and toast that had become their standard dinner. Pasta with meat sauce that smelled like heaven. Bread still warm from the oven. Fruit that actually looked fresh instead of bruised and desperate. He tried to eat slowly. Failed. Hunger won. Sophia watched him with something that might have been pity, or might have been recognition. "When did you last eat properly?" "Yesterday." "No." Christopher paused, trying to remember. "Day before, maybe." She made a sound deep in her throat, disapproving and sad. Then she piled more food on his plate. Between bites, she measured him with her eyes, then disappeared briefly and returned with clothes. Jeans that looked brand new, a soft t-shirt, a hoodie that didn't have holes. "Change after you eat. I wash your clothes." That's how Alfredo found them an hour later. Christopher at the kitchen island, wearing clean clothes that actually fit, finishing what might have been his third helping of pasta. Sophia watching over him like a hawk, protecting something small and breakable. Alfredo stopped in the doorway, and Christopher immediately put down his fork, suddenly remembering where he was, who this man was. "Sorry, finish your food." Alfredo's voice was tired, in a way Christopher hadn't heard before. He loosened his tie, rolling his shoulders like they carried weight Christopher couldn't see. "Sophia take care of you?" "Yes, sir." Christopher gestured to his new clothes. "She gave me these. And food. So much food." "Good." Alfredo pulled out his phone, typed something. Then he looked at Christopher, really looked at him, and something in those winter eyes had thawed slightly. "Your mother will be here in an hour. My men are bringing her from the hospital. She's gonna stay here tonight. Both of you are." "Why?" "Because Thorne is a rat, and rats do unpredictable things when cornered." Alfredo said it simply, like he was discussing the weather. "You're safer here, until I handle him." Christopher nodded slowly, processing this. "Sir, thank you. For stopping. For helping. For..." His voice broke. Nobody else would have. Alfredo's jaw worked like the words tasted strange. "You stood barefoot in a road and stopped 3 cars full of armed men because you thought maybe someone would help. That's either the bravest or stupidest thing I've seen in 20 years. Which one is it?" Alfredo's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Almost. "Haven't decided yet." The call came at 2:47 a.m. Alfredo had been awake anyway, standing in his study with a glass of scotch he hadn't touched, staring at financial reports he wasn't reading. His mind kept circling back to the kitchen earlier that evening. to Christopher eating pasta like it was a gift from God, to Kathleen's face when Marco had brought her through the door and she'd collapsed into her son's arms sobbing. When his phone lit up with Dante's number, he knew before answering that Thorne had made his choice. Talk. The Reeves house. 4 vehicles, maybe 12 men. They're hitting it hard, boss. Dante's voice was tight, professional, but underneath ran a current of barely controlled rage. Molotov cocktails. They're trying to burn it. Alfredo was moving before Dante finished speaking, grabbing his jacket, his piece, already mentally calculating routes and response times. Casualties? House is empty. Marco got the mother out hours ago, like you ordered. But boss, Dante paused. They know she's not there. They're burning it anyway. This isn't about collection anymore. This is about sending a message. Or erasing evidence. Alfredo's jaw clenched. Thorne wasn't just stupid and greedy. He was panicked. Panicked men burned things. Houses. Papers. People who could testify about threats and extortion. I'm 8 minutes out. Keep them contained. Nobody leaves that street. Copy. Alfredo took the stairs 3 at a time, finding Christopher asleep on a leather couch in the library where he'd crashed after dinner. Kathleen sleeping in the chair beside him, her hand resting on her son's shoulder even in sleep. For a moment, he considered leaving them both sleeping. Then he remembered that this was their life burning, their home, their last piece of solid ground. Ms. Reeves. He touched her shoulder gently. Wake up. She came awake instantly, the way nurses did, already alert. What? Your son is fine. You're both safe. But your house. He watched understanding dawn like a brutal sunrise. Thorne didn't wait. He's burning it now. Christopher stirred, waking to his mother's sharp intake of breath. What's happening? Get your shoes, Alfredo said, looking at the boy. Both of you. We're going. To our house. Christopher's voice was small. To what's left of it. The night sky over Carpenter Street glowed orange and furious. Smoke rose in thick columns, blotting out stars that had watched better nights. The Reeves house was a skeleton of flame, fire crawling up walls that had held a family's life together with dignity and determination and duct tape. 4 black escalades formed a perimeter around it, and men stood watching their work with the casual satisfaction of arsonists who believed they'd gotten away with something. They hadn't noticed the 3 Mercedes sedans approaching with headlights off. Alfredo's convoy rolled to a stop at the street's entrance, blocking the only exit. His men emerged like shadows made solid, spreading out with the practiced efficiency of soldiers who'd done this dance before. Weapons appeared. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud yet, just the quiet promise of violence held in check. Thorne stood nearest to the burning house, his leather jacket reflecting firelight, phone pressed to his ear. Probably calling in more men. Probably realizing too late that he'd crossed a line, drawn in blood and consequence. He saw Alfredo and went very still. Boss, Polly's voice carried across the street, panicked. Boss, we got a problem. We got a lot more than that, Thorne said quietly. Alfredo walked toward them with Christopher and Kathleen flanking him. He'd tried to leave them in the car, but Kathleen had refused with a steel in her voice that reminded him why she'd survived this long. So they walked together, Mafia boss, widow and barefoot boy wearing borrowed shoes, through smoke that stung their eyes and air that tasted like ash and endings. You had 48 hours, Alfredo said when he was close enough that Thorne could see his expression in the firelight. It's been less than 12. This wasn't. Thorne started. Don't. One word, sharp as a gunshot. Don't insult me with lies. Behind them, sirens began their approach. Fire trucks, probably. Maybe police, though Alfredo doubted it. This neighborhood didn't rate fast response times. Christopher stared at the burning house, at the home where his mother had fought impossible battles, at the walls that had held his childhood. Tears cut clean tracks through the ash on his face, but he didn't make a sound. Kathleen's hand found her son's shoulder, gripping tight, and when she looked at Thorne, her expression was devastation hardened into something that would never forgive. And something in Alfredo's chest, something he'd thought calcified years ago, cracked open. The flames painted everything in shades of damnation. Orange light danced across expensive cars and cheap men, across manicured lawns and a house that had been someone's entire world. The heat was intense enough that Thorne's crew had backed up 20 feet, but they still stood there, watching their handiwork like it was something to be proud of. Alfredo's men had them surrounded without seeming to move at all. One moment, the street had 2 exits. The next, both were blocked by bodies that knew how to use the weapons they carried. No shouting. No theatrics. Just the quiet competence of predators who didn't need to announce themselves. Mr. Lorenzo. Thorne's voice had lost its street swagger, replaced by the high-wire tension of a man watching his grave being dug in real time. This is a misunderstanding. We were just disposing of evidence, Alfredo finished. Eliminating witnesses? Which crime are you confessing to first? Christopher's hand found Alfredo's jacket sleeve, gripping the expensive fabric with ash-stained fingers. Alfredo didn't pull away. The papers, Alfredo continued, his voice carrying over the fire's roar. The debt documents you promised to hand over. They were in that house, weren't they? Thorne's silence was answer enough. And the widow who could testify about your threats, your proposals for alternative payment? She was supposed to be in that house too, wasn't she? You're making assumptions. I'm stating facts. Alfredo's voice dropped to something sub-zero. You came to my territory, preyed on my people, and when I gave you a chance to walk away, you decided to burn the evidence and kill a woman whose only crime was loving a dying man too much. She's not your people. Thorne's desperation finally cracked through. She's nobody. A broke nurse in a shit neighborhood. You don't even know her. I know her son. Alfredo felt Christopher flinch beside him. I know he stood barefoot in the middle of a foggy road, holding a cardboard sign, believing that maybe, someone would see him. Someone would stop. Someone would give a damn. He took a step forward, and Thorne stumbled back. You want to know what makes someone my people, Basilio? It's not blood. It's not territory drawn on maps. It's this. Alfredo gestured to the burning house, to Christopher, to Kathleen, standing with her son's world turning to ash. You made it my business when you decided a 12-year-old boy and his mother were acceptable collateral damage. Dante moved forward, pressing something into Thorne's hand. A burner phone, different from the first one. That's connected to a live feed, Alfredo said quietly. Video of you, right now, at this fire. Audio of everything you just said. It's being recorded in 3 separate locations. If anything happens to me, to my family, to Christopher, or to Kathleen Reeves, anything at all, that video goes to the FBI, the state police, and every major news outlet in the tri-state area. Thorne stared at the phone like it was a viper. But more importantly, Alfredo's smile was winter and wolves. It goes to the Genovese family, the Colombos, the Lucianos, every family that operates in this region. And they're going to be very interested to learn that you've been running debt schemes in territories you don't own, collecting money you haven't paid taxes on, operating like you answer to no one. The color drained from Thorne's face. See, that's the thing about apex predators, Basilio. We don't just hunt, we enforce the natural order. And bottom feeders like you? You've been swimming in protected waters without permission. Fire trucks rounded the corner, their sirens cutting through the night. My men are going to escort you somewhere quiet, Alfredo continued. Somewhere we can have a longer conversation about restitution. About how you're going to rebuild that house, brick by brick. About how you're going to liquidate every debt you hold and return the money to every family you've victimized. And about what happens if you ever set foot in my territory again. Paulie made a move toward his waistband. Didn't even finish the gesture before 3 red dots appeared on his chest, laser sights painting him in his own mortality. Don't, Dante said softly. Christopher finally spoke, his voice small but clear, directed at the man who'd hit him. You burned my house, Paulie. Paulie looked at him, and maybe some part of his humanity still functioned because shame flickered across his face. Brief, real. Yeah, kid, I did. Why? The question hung in the smoke-thick air. Simple. Devastating. Paulie had no answer. What answer could there be? Alfredo placed his hand on Christopher's shoulder, then looked at Kathleen, whose face showed a grief too large for tears. Take them, he told Dante. His men moved with synchronized precision, and the Vulture crew disappeared into vehicles that would take them somewhere their screams wouldn't bother the neighbors. Christopher watched his house burn, one hand gripping Alfredo's sleeve, the other held by his mother. Alfredo watched them both, this family that had been broken by greed and circumstance, and made a decision that would ripple through more lives than just theirs. In the distance, fire trucks arrived with water that came too late. 3 weeks later, the house on Carpenter Street looked like something from a fever dream in reverse. Where there had been ash, there was now fresh timber. Where there had been charred siding, there was now yellow paint, the exact shade Christopher remembered from when his father was alive. The porch no longer sagged. The concrete blocks painted like bricks had been replaced with actual stone pillars that looked like they could hold up the world. Kathleen stood in the driveway, one hand pressed to her mouth, tears running unchecked down her face. Christopher stood beside her, wearing shoes that actually fit, clothes that were his own, purchased during the 3 weeks they'd stayed at the Lorenzo estate while construction crews worked around the clock. "Mom," he whispered, "is it really ours?" She couldn't answer. The papers in her other hand trembled. Deed transferred, mortgage paid in full, property taxes covered for the next 5 years. All of it legal, all of it clean, all of it signed by holding companies that traced back to networks, that traced back to a man who decided that sometimes the world needed fixing. The 3 weeks at the estate had been surreal. Sophia had clucked over them both like a mother hen, making sure Christopher went to school from the mansion, driven there and back by Marco, who'd become something like a friend. Kathleen had continued working her shifts at the hospital, though Alfredo had quietly arranged for her schedule to ease, for the mounting hospital bills from her husband's care to mysteriously resolve themselves. They'd seen Alfredo every evening at dinner, an unspoken rule that while they stayed under his roof, they ate together. Christopher had watched this man who could order deaths with a phone call, patiently teach him chess, had watched him listen to Kathleen's stories about nursing, with genuine interest, had watched him slowly, almost reluctantly, become something neither of them had expected. Almost like family, a black Mercedes sat at the curb now. The same one from that foggy morning, the same one that had stopped because a barefoot boy believed in miracles. Alfredo emerged, and Kathleen's breath caught. He wore a different suit today, charcoal gray instead of midnight blue, but the winter eyes were the same. Except they weren't, not entirely. 3 weeks of dinner conversations, and chess games, and accidental domesticity had thawed something at the edges. "Ms. Reeves," he nodded to her, then to Christopher. "Kid, Mr. Lorenzo." Kathleen's voice was steady despite the tears. "I don't know how to thank you. I don't know how to." "You don't." He said it simply, not unkind. "This debt doesn't require repayment. But surely there's something." "There is." Alfredo's gaze shifted to Christopher. "Your son did something extraordinarily stupid 3 weeks ago. He stepped into a road and stopped 3 cars full of armed men because he thought it might save his mother. That kind of courage, that kind of loyalty." He paused, jaw working. "That's worth more than $83,000. Worth more than a house." Christopher stepped forward, and Kathleen saw her son struggling with something, the weight of gratitude too large for a 12-year-old boy to carry. "Sir, Christopher's voice cracked. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stopped. If you'd just driven past like everyone else. Someone else would have stopped eventually." "No." Christopher shook his head. "They wouldn't have. People saw us struggling. They saw Mom working herself to death. They saw the men coming to the house. Nobody stopped. Nobody cared." He looked up at Alfredo with eyes that had aged decades in weeks. "You did." Something passed across Alfredo's face. Brief, unguarded. The expression of a man remembering what it felt like to believe someone might care. "Your mother's a fighter," he said finally. "She just needed someone to even the odds." "And now?" Kathleen asked. "What happens now?" "Now you live." Alfredo gestured to the house. "You work your shifts. You raise your son. You paint the kitchen whatever color you want. You exist without looking over your shoulder. The Vulture crew doesn't exist anymore. Thorne and his associates have been relocated. The debt portfolios have been dissolved. Every family they victimized has been contacted and compensated." Alfredo's smile was thin, sharp. "Turns out, when you operate without permission in occupied territory, the families who actually own that territory take exception." Kathleen nodded slowly, understanding the words he wasn't saying. Understanding that justice sometimes came in forms that never saw a courtroom. "There's paperwork inside," Alfredo continued. "New deed, insurance documents, contact information from my lawyer if anyone at all, tries to make claims on this property. The house is yours. Legally. Completely. No strings." "No strings," Kathleen repeated, disbelief coloring her voice. "No strings." Christopher moved forward suddenly, wrapping his arms around Alfredo in a hug that caught the man completely off guard. For a moment, Alfredo stood frozen, hands hovering awkwardly, clearly uncertain what to do with this display of genuine, uncomplicated affection. Then his hand settled on Christopher's shoulders. "Just for a second. Just long enough. Thank you," Christopher whispered into expensive fabric. "Thank you for stopping." When Christopher pulled back, Kathleen stepped forward. She didn't hug him. Some boundaries even gratitude couldn't cross, but she took his hand in both of hers. You gave us back our lives. More than that. You gave us back hope. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, if there's anything we can ever do. There is one thing. Alfredo's voice was quiet. He looked at Christopher. Keep the shoes on from now on, kid. And maybe don't flag down any more suspicious vehicles. Christopher laughed, despite his tears. Yes, sir. Alfredo turned to leave, then paused. Looked back at Kathleen. Your husband. He'd be proud of what you've done. What you've survived. Kathleen's tears came harder. He would have liked you. Despite everything. He would have seen what I see. What's that? Someone who stopped when everyone else drove past. Alfredo nodded once. Then he pulled something from his pocket. A business card, plain white, with a single phone number embossed in black. He handed it to Kathleen. That's my personal line. Not for the lawyer. Not for business. For you. If Christopher needs anything, school, college, whatever, you call. If anyone bothers you, you call. If your car breaks down at 3 a.m, you call. He met her eyes, and she saw something fierce there. You're not alone anymore. Either of you. Then he walked back to his car, where Dante waited with the door open. Christopher and Kathleen watched the Mercedes pull away, watched it disappear around the corner into whatever world Mafia bosses disappeared into when they weren't saving barefoot boys and burning houses. The sun was setting over Carpenter Street, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. The house stood yellow and whole. The porch held firm. Inside, furniture waited, new pieces mixed with things salvaged from the fire, blending past and present into something that felt like, maybe, possibly, hopefully, a future. Mom? Christopher's voice was quiet. Do you think we'll ever see him again? Kathleen looked at her son, at the house, at the business card in her hand that felt heavier than paper should feel. I think, she said slowly, that man doesn't do anything halfway. If he says we're under his protection, he means it. If he says to call if we need anything, he means it. She pulled Christopher close. And I think that sometimes, the people who save us are the ones we least expect. They walked into their home together, mother and son, survivors of storms that should have drowned them. Behind them, the street was quiet, peaceful, safe. Somewhere in the city, a man sat in the back of a black car and thought about cardboard signs and bare feet and the mathematics of courage. Thought about 3 weeks of dinner conversations with a widow who reminded him that strength came in many forms. Thought about a boy who'd stood in a road and believed in something better. Thought about how sometimes stopping was the most powerful thing a person could do. And for the first time in 20 years, Alfredo Lorenzo smiled like he meant it, then picked up his phone and called Sophia. The boy's birthday is in 6 weeks, he said. Find out what 12-year-olds want these days. And Sophia? Make sure he gets it.